Ian, he's one of our great guests here on Morning Live who always does this for us, reviews some of our business books, and it's so nice to have you. Welcome again, Ian. How are you doing? And compliments of the season to you.
And to you too.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Once again, people making me jealous with that view behind you. It looks amazing. Are you having a good break in Cape Town?
It is, and it's absolutely beautiful. The weather's been fantastic, and it's lived up to what you expect it to be.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm glad. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. All right, let's talk business, though, because we've got you here, and this seems like such an interesting book. Rob Rose describing Barry Tannenbaum as South Africa's Bernie Madoff. How was he able to draw the wool over some of South Africans' eyes?
Firstly, it's very complex. I think that when you think of this, it's a Ponzi scheme. You think of these things as being very obvious to everybody. This particular one was very complex. And I think that it would have been very, very difficult for all but real experts to be able to see through this. I think what's worthwhile is just to understand what a Ponzi scheme is. The name Ponzi comes from an American, well, an Italian, lived in America called Charles Ponzi. He came to America in about 1903 and very ambitious. And he did all sorts of things from spending time in prison to serving tables. And then he found after the First World War that there was a strange opportunity. These stamps, prepaid stamps that you did for returning articles that you'd bought, were selling for 4 times as much in the United States as they were selling back in Italy. So Charles Ponzi sends Mama some money and says, look, send me a whole bunch of these stamps. I'm going to sell them here in the United States. And since they were 4 times as valuable in the United States as they were in Italy, he figured that he'd have himself a great business. Well, it turned out it was much more complicated than that, but that didn't stop him telling all his friends about this wonderful scheme. And lots of people wanted to get in on the scheme, and they invested with Charles. And he was paying them returns of 1,500% a year when you could get 5% a year in your bank. And people thought this was magnificent. You put your money in, you really did get your money out. Everybody's making a lot of money. The problem with this was that he was paying out the people who were investing with him by having new people coming into his scheme and investing as well. Now that just can't last, because eventually you're going to run out of people who are going to put money into your scheme to pay back the original ones, because he never ever sold any of the stamps. He died in poverty, but he left the world a wonderful legacy. His name, the Ponzi scheme. And literally every Ponzi scheme, whether it's the Tannenbaum scheme or it's Bernie Madoff scheme, all of them have exactly the same structure. You borrow money from people, promise them wonderful returns, and you pay them back by the money that you get from new investors. And that's exactly what went on in this situation.
Scary, yeah, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Do you think that by any chance his background as the grandson of the founder of one of the country's biggest pharmaceutical firms also made it a bit easier for people to actually believe in him?
Well, I think that this wasn't something that silly people got involved in. Some very, very smart people got involved. Let me give you an example. If you had an opportunity to invest in a scheme which is going to give you a lot of money back, much more than you can get anywhere else, and I say to you, well, the person who's setting the scheme up has had a very, very long history in the pharmaceutical industry. His whole family were in it. They built one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in this country called Adcock Ingram's, which is a very, very prestigious company in the news at the moment. That's the family he comes from. Because he knows so much about the industry, he's seen gaps. And he's smart, and he's been able to take the gaps. And he's going to import chemicals which are absolutely necessary for ARVs, which are being produced in huge quantities in this country, as we know, because there's such an epidemic. Now, you ask yourself, well, who's he selling this to? So, well, he's only selling it to people like Aspen, one of the iconic companies in this country. And you say, well, what proof is there? So, no, don't worry, we've got orders, and he'll show you purchase orders, and he'll show you shipping documents, and he'll show you banking details, and you look at the stuff, and it's absolutely legitimate. Well, it looks legitimate. All those documents, by the way, were fraudulent. They'd been crafted in such a way to fool people, but there were never any orders, there were never any purchases, there were never any shipments. And you see the stuff, and you look at this, and you say, well, this sounds very, very good. Not only that, but my friends have put money in and my friends have got money out. And you ask yourself, would you have been involved in something like that? in the beginning, you might have asked yourself some real questions. In the beginning, you might have said to yourself, well, this sounds too good to be true, and why is Barry Tannenbaum so generous as to share all this wealth with people? And he says, I'm a nice guy, I like sharing with people. After a while, once the scam gets bigger and bigger, it becomes more and more difficult for anybody but the most astute and people who spend a lot of time researching this to see that there's anything in it that should alert you, that should make you scared.
Jeez. That is absolutely amazing. I mean, were we talking about billions? Were we talking about 12 billion rand? This must have had an impact on our economy.
Well, I think firstly we say 12 billion too fast.
Okay.
Just let's put it in perspective for a moment.
I will slow it down.
If you had to count to 1 billion,
sure,
you would not be able to do that in a lifetime. If you had to count one number in 1 second, which you can't do because you can't count 972,422,000 in 1 second, but if you could, and you never slept, it would take you 32 years to count up to 1 billion because there are a billion seconds in 32 years. So you could not count up to 1 billion in a lifetime because you have to sleep. You certainly can't get anywhere near 12 billion. So we're talking about humongous amounts of money, and this money was taken from some very canny people who could afford it, but also lots of people which the book describes, who lost absolutely everything. They lost their homes, their life savings, inheritances. This is an enormous amount of money just disappeared out of the lives of individual people.
Wow. All right. So now the author of this book, Rob Rose, Rob is also, obviously, I mean, he's a journalist. I know he works for the Business Day. He also spoke to some of the investors. What are some of the stories that they spoke of?
Well, some of the big investors, one of the most commonly known ones is Sean Summers. Sean says, look, I've made lots of very, very good investments. He's a very smart investor and a very smart businessman. And he says, well, I made lots of good investments. This is one of the bad ones. But then you get other people, smaller people who lived on salaries, who'd had savings and had taken bonds on their homes, or people who'd had this was their pension money on which they were going to live for the rest of their lives, and they'd invest in this believing that they were going to get their money back. I think that the true value of reading this book, yes, it has lots of very human stories in, but I think that the true value of reading this book is the tale, the cautionary tale that it tells. If it was a simple thing, where everybody who should have known better, could have known better, it wouldn't be that interesting. What makes it most interesting is how people who are reasonably thoughtful could get caught up in something like this. And the cautionary is how careful you need to be when you put your money in the hands of anybody else.
Yeah. It's so true. It's absolutely true. All right, so this book is out. It's in bookstores around the country now. I think it's going to make for an interesting read. Before I let you go, just finally, we've been reviewing a lot of books throughout the year, but which one would you say has been or are your best business books for 2013?
I think that there are 4 books which really stand out for me, and for completely different reasons. One book is called Losing It. Losing It it's an easy read, but it's written by a man, Bill Lane, who used to work for GE as a senior speechwriter. He wrote speeches for the likes of Jack Welch. And Bill Lane, at about 56 years old, he said he was retired by GE, and he describes how he spoiled his career. And he didn't do anything particularly bad. He just sort of started coasting. And he looking back on his career, he wrote this very easy-to-read book on what you need to know in order not to trash your career. Now, there are lots of books on how to build fabulous careers, but I don't think there are too many books that I've come across that actually give you some good advice, the stuff that you wish your granddad, your grandmom, or your dad or mom told you about how not to destroy your career. And I'll give you some very, very basic ideas. One, for example, is never, ever lie. Now, most people think, well, you don't want to lie big, but never lie in business. He gives an example, I think, which illustrates this best. A woman was a supervisor level, was entitled to take some of her staff out for lunch, which she did. And not all of them came, just a small group came, and they had a really good lunch and spent a huge amount of money. the problem was that she could not have justified the expense when she had to submit the chit to finance for reimbursement. So she added on a couple of extra names so it didn't look so bad per person. Anyway, somebody in finance asked one of the people who was supposed to have been at the lunch and said to them, well, how was your lunch? He said, no, I wasn't there. I didn't go to lunch. And of course, it all became revealed. She was fired for trying to cheat and as a liar. Now you ask yourself the question, what would have happened if she'd submitted the bill honestly? They would have said to her, we're not going to pay this amount for a lunch. You better pay it. She would still have her job and would have been out of pocket a bit. One of the basic rules of business from the very beginning to the very end is never ever lie. The second piece of advice that he gives is understand that your job as an employee is to make your manager look good. Most people that I meet believe that they're smarter than their managers. In fact, almost everybody I meet believes that they're smarter than their managers. And Bill Lane's advice to people is, if you don't want to trash your career, understand that your job is to make your manager look good. So you do whatever he wants, and you do it as well as you possibly can. If it's a really bad idea, you'll be able to say, I was the one who tried incredibly hard to make a really, really bad idea work. And it didn't, but at least I tried hard.
Wow.
If it turns out to be a good idea, you'll be the one who'll be able to say, I'm the one who worked incredibly hard on this fabulous idea that succeeded. So he's got lots of good advice like that, practical, down-to-earth stuff.
Okay, so
I think that is a good book.
That's a book called Losing It, that's right. All right, what else?
There's two other books that I'm going to cheat a bit here and put them together as if they were one.
Okay.
The one book is called Contagious, and it's how ideas spread. And the second book is Demand, and how you create demand for your product. Now, the biggest problem that business people have, doesn't matter what business you're in, whether you're in dentistry or in supermarketing, you have to have people talk about your product and get your product to spread. One of the ways we try to spread products is by advertising, but we definitely know that word of mouth is far more powerful than advertising. I'm more likely to go to a restaurant because a friend of mine told me how fantastic it was than because I saw an advert in the newspaper. So word of mouth is very powerful. We believe now, and we're being told more and more, that you have to be online and that social media is the way that we spread word of mouth to millions more people, thousands more people than you could have done before. What they fail to remind you of is that no more than 7% of purchases or interest in purchases come from online, and the balance, 93%, come from communications that people have with each other offline, face-to-face real stuff.
Sure, that's amazing.
And Berger's book called Contagious talks about how we get other people to talk about our products, how we get our products to spread. Let me give you one hint of an idea. People talk about products because it gives you social currency. If you were at a braai over the festive period and you say, I went to New York and I went to visit Macy's, nobody's going to be interested. Everybody who goes to New York is likely to do that. If you said, I went to New York and I went to this little hot dog shop, nice hot dogs, wide variety, but in the corner there was an old-fashioned telephone booth. And you go into this booth and you dial a number 2. And they answer and they say, do you have a booking? And if you have a booking, at the back of the telephone booth opens up and you go to one of the most sought-after pubs in New York called Please Don't Tell.
Oh, wow.
Now, if I told you that, and by the way, it does exist. There really is a place like that. That would have people around the braai talking.
Oh, it will, and it'll have me booking a ticket to New York while you're talking.
Absolutely. So the challenge is, how do you get people how do you get your ideas to spread? And the book Contagion is a book by a professor. He teaches at Wharton, and he's done good research on how ideas spread. And by the way, even simple, mundane ideas. For example, there was a woman who was cooking, and her father-in-law was a mealie farmer. And she said, Dad, can you help us with this? And he popped the mealies into the microwave, whole with all this, with the skin on, and then he took it out, took a knife, chopped off the edge, shook them, and took off every bit of silk around the mealies in one, just by waving the mealie.
Wow.
And she said, that's magnificent. Let me quickly take a video of that. I want to send to my daughter who's overseas. It's gone viral. There must be about 3 million people have watched a man take the silk off mealies with one shake.
Oh my gosh.
Getting ideas to go viral doesn't have to be something which is incredibly unusual. It can be very mundane, provided it's practical.
Wow.
So what he's done in this book is shared with you lots and lots of ideas about practical things.
Oh, Ian, I'm going to be enemy number one. I have to wrap you. I've got to get to the news headlines.
Okay.
Just give me the name of that last book. That's the least you can do, because these stories are amazing. What's it called?
The last book is called Contagious, and it's written by Jonah Berger.
Okay. So it's Contagious. The other book is called Losing It. The other one is Demand. You said there were 4. What's the 4th one?
Yes. The 4th one is a book on entrepreneurs called Worthless, Impossible, and Useless.
Worthless, Impossible, and Useless. Yeah.
And stupid. And it's written by a man who studied entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And what it does, it tells you what entrepreneurs really are. For example, we believe Google young entrepreneurs, you'll get 18 million hits, 18 million sites.
Yeah.
Google old entrepreneurs, you'll get maybe 3 million.
Yeah.
The fact is, the reality is that there are many, many more older people who are successful entrepreneurs than young people.
All right.
And most of the young people we hear about have been under supervision of older people. The book debunks myths about entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating book which will get people's perspectives of how you do entrepreneurship and what makes for successful entrepreneurship.
All right. Ian Mann, thank you for talking to us. Thank you for those books. I'll read out the list to you after the news headlines again. That's Ian Mann in our Cape Town studios. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for being our guest. Enjoy the rest of your holiday, Ian.
Pleasure.
Right, it's just gone 7:30, just a minute late. Let's get those news headlines to you now.